I'm waiting. I'm waiting for Dominic. Dominic is not in. Yeah. She was talking to Hugo before. Where is Dominic? Where is Dominic? Cannot start without. Maybe go and yeah, thank you. Remember Hi, let's restart again. We are already a few minutes late. Please take your seats. We're gonna start right away. I have maybe just a few housekeeping reminders and announcements. So presentations that you will see, they will be made available on the conference website at the end of the conference to make sure we reflect the latest updates from all presenters. Also, these sessions will be recorded. We will share with you a link to the video when available. A reminder to all presenters, please stick to your time. There is a gentleman here, Yuri, who is very strict, and I think he has some signs for you. So I see that somewhere. Yeah, make sure that when you see the 1 minute wrap up reminder, you take 1 minute. And moderators, there will be a Q&A session at the end of each session, except this session. This session is a little special. We will have 4 15-minute presentations, and Dominique will take brief questions. We agreed with the presenters at the end of each presentation, and then there will be a panel discussion in the second part. And in that panel, we will also use like a Slido. It's like Mentimeter for a short poll. So a reminder to connect your phone to the Wi-Fi because you're going to have to connect to the internet. So with that, I'll give the floor to Dominique. Dominique, over to you.
Thank you, Marco. Hello, everyone. So after the very enlightening welcome remark and keynote speech we have, this session is meant to show you how concretely these reasons for the success of SDMX have been put in place. So I will have the pleasure to ask Marco Pellegrino from Eurostat and also the early time of SDMX with the ISO, and continues after leaving Eurostat to speak about the past. Then I will turn to Petra Malertz and Frederick van Eck, who will from the National Bank of Belgium, and in particular the team for statistical communication and dissemination, to talk about how they implement and use SDMX in internal and dissemination process. And then I will turn to Jeff Danford, who is chief product chief product manager from the IMF, data program chief at International Monetary Fund, to talk about StatGPT. And we will close with Abdullah, who will present some use case, so the new use case from SDMX. So I just stop there and give the floor to Marco for his presentation. 10 minutes.
Let's see. Is it? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, good. So first of all, it's a great honor for me to open this first session of the conference about reflecting on the past. I'm actually one of the old dinosaurs who were there in SDMX still in 2001. Now, well, I worked at Eurostat for almost 30 years, and now I'm retired, but I'm a kind of sort of SDMX volunteer. Now, thinking about the past, I realized a couple of things. First is that time passes, because when I started in this, I was 42, and now I'm already retired. The second thing is that reading on some websites, I spotted some inaccuracies about dates and events on the past. Then I said to me, well, maybe before even thinking about shaping the future, we should need to get some clarity on the past, on what really happened. If somebody's interested, I could even elaborate on this and write something more specific on this, but this is another chapter. So let's start with the title of this session, SDMX at 18. Now, 18 years ago, we were in 2007, but the first version of SDMX is 2004, and it took some time to get there. But there is an explanation. SDMX is not taking years away to look younger. The thing is that simply 18 years ago, there was the first global conference in Washington, D.C. So this is 18 years from the first global conference, but the work started a bit earlier. The first SDMX workshop was held in September 2001, and the very first teleconference, even earlier. The date was exactly 12th of March 2001. You're not supposed to read this; it's too small, but you will read the presentation later on. Now, this is the first official memo about SDMX. Still, the name didn't exist. And there was a telephone conference in March 21. Now, if you read, actually, the third paragraph of these notes, this is what Paul van den Berg said. Paul van den Berg was actually the director in charge of that group of alchemists in the BIS tower that Bruno was referring to, thanks to whom SDMX actually here, the person who led these meetings. I came to Basel many times, so I know very well the tower and the square and everything. Also the liquorly biscuits. We were a little bit the guests in our meeting and after our meeting, just to take something sweet after all the discussion. At that time, the organization, the sponsor was still at that time 5, because you won't see the UN and and the World Bank. But if you read what Paul Vandenberg was saying at that time, you can really find everything that we have done in the following 10 years. Emerging standards necessitate the broad coordination among agencies to develop standards. Everyone has to gain. There are no conflict of interest. There's a need for a global perspective, so including the UN and commercial stakeholders, so growing number of sponsors, and we should prepare for a broad meeting on this subject. These were Paul Vandenberg's words in 2001 at the telephone. Now, the first workshop happened in September 6 and 7, 2001, just a few days before 9/11 in Washington. Actually, I even have some draft when the real dates were 10th and 11th of September 2001. Then luckily, we did it 1 week earlier. And this was the first, so I would say the real birth date of SDMX is, I would say, March 21, or if we want, September 21 with the first workshop. Don't know if this works. How can I go? Okay. Now, too much. So the agenda from the first workshop, where I could see some of the people who were very important for the development of SDMX, like Gabi Becker and Stuart Feder from BIS, Christos Androvitsanias from the ECB, Dennis Ward from the OECD. There are many, many, many others. Maybe I should mention only those because there are many, many people to mention. In 2002, we had the first presentation to the UNSC and the first technical meeting of the coordination group. On that occasion, actually, I was not there because in Luxembourg, my wife was about to give birth to our first child, so I had another much closer project to take care of. But in June 2002, the first 4 pilot projects were formalized with their respective sponsors, other names. We had the case study coordinated by the BIS, and we are also the metadata common vocabulary, which was more or less my project where I worked together with OECD and Dennis Ward for standardization of the terms of the metadata terms. So the first glossary of terms, and there were some other projects. So from here, let's say we start going from the idea to the standard with some pilot projects. Now, to reach this, there was a series of obstacles. Well, first of all, running a task force with 7 international organizations on board, each with its own agenda, priorities, vision, organizational constraint, living even in different time zones, was not so evident, at least at that time. I remember many phone calls from Jim McKee, who was leading the task force at the beginning, from Washington at 5 or 6 p.m., where we were concluding with something like, have a nice dinner, no, have a nice lunch. So anyway, it took some time to develop things. So this may be the first message to take back home, is that if you want to work globally with hundreds of organizations, statistical organizations, national banks, agencies, it takes time to get something good off the ground, and it takes also a good governance. Now, a formal governance for SDMX only arrives in 2007, when the sponsors approve a formal memorandum of understanding. In that first global conference, also organized in Washington, D.C. During the first 6 years of operation, when we developed SDMX 1, SDMX 2.0, and the ISO recognition and the UNSC blessing as a preferred sponsor, preferred standard, well, we had no formal governance. So we acted as if everything was clear, but we had no formal document. And even in 2007, after the first memorandum of understanding, it was not clear how the Secretariat would have implemented or discussed technical proposals to amend the standards, how the statistical guidelines would have been created, elaborated. So it's only in 2011, again in the global conference in Washington, DC, that we created the two working groups, the statistical working group and the technical working group, with which I would say the governance was now, the picture was more complete. So the real work and the work for the governance went in parallel. It's not one before the other. So it took 2-3 years to launch the version 1 of SDMix, then another year to launch the real objective, that is the XML version. The XML version of the standards with the registry specification and the web services. Then we had the ISO recognition, the UNSC recognition. Then we could focus on training, on the free tools, on the live implementation, without which SDMix would have been just a nice picture on the screen. We have explained several times that SDMix is a kind of complex machinery, liberating resources for simple things that statisticians have always been doing, describing statistics, using standard concepts and codes, and making the information travel in different ways using different exchange and dissemination modes. On this, everything is driven by the powerful information model, and each IT format and tool is an implementation of the information model. And just let me give the credit for this to Chris Nelson, who was the main architect of this information model. It would be nice to describe all those things in detail, but this is what we do normally in the training courses, and there is no time to do this. Just one slide to read. Now, let's go to the conclusion. Let's say, if you think about it, the first real lesson from the SDMX story is that all good standards must change. Otherwise, they're dead. There's no living standard which doesn't change. There will be different versions, and users are not always expected to always use the latest version, but they should be, the sponsoring organization should provide support for several versions of the standards, all of which are in use. There are some danger in this, that too much change may discourage adoption, but also not giving users all the functionality that they want is also a way of discouraging the adoption. So we need to be clear about this trade-off. Now, this is the last slide. These are the lessons from these golden years. Collaboration beats competition in infrastructure project. It should be clear for all what I try to mention. Build on the ongoing need for interoperability in data sharing, setting up a collaborative framework. This is also intuitive. Start small, scale big. There will be no big bang, but we started with an external debt exercise before tackling more complex domains like national accounts, balance of payments. And of course, we should develop also, we need to take let's say, give some attention to developing software tools and agree data flows for not leaving the standard just as a cathedral or in the desert. Open standards accelerate innovation. If we took a group of experts working and developing things together, there's a real value added. Last but not least, use SDMX for what it can give throughout the statistical cycle. SDMX is able to cover the whole statistical data cycle and shouldn't be used only for as an exchange format just for trial, but it can assist setting up dissemination platform using SDMX end-to-end in connection with other construction like the GSBPM and the GSIM. These are all lessons coming from SDMX, but can be applied to any other project. I just wanted to mention one at the end because it's just much closer to my heart, because I also participated in setting up this, also in Rome in 2013, which is a language for data validation and transformation at VTL, which is an implementation of the SDMX information model, but tried also to go one step beyond, taking the common parts of GSIM, SDMX, and DDI, and being able to represent concepts for any kind of data. This is a good product at the end of SDMX. It follows the same rules, and it's an example of how you can follow the rules that we used in SDMX to go even further. That's all. My colleague will go more in detail. I just had the time to give some sketches of how SDMX was born. The rest is for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marco. In the interest of time, I would suggest we group question by 2 presentations. If not, we will not manage to have all the speakers. So I turn directly to Petra and Frederic for them to show an implementation of SDMX in the case of National Bank of Belgium.
Thank you, Dominique. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I first of all would like to thank the organization for giving us the opportunity to sharing our experiences with you. Okay, is this better? Okay. We will take you through our project where we integrated SDMX for reporting and dissemination, and we are evolving now towards AI. We will make a short journey over the past, the present, and a little glimpse of the future. So in the past, we had already SDMX for certain specific processes, such as reporting and the data portal. But it was a limited solution, not harmonized, no harmonized data nor metadata. The database was an own construction, not SDMX compliant, and a lot of parallel flows lived in Excel to report and to disseminate data. Publications were in PDF mostly, and with basic visualizations. Now we are at a fully integrated SDMX system for both for the database reporting dissemination. We also set up a collaborative model with our users, with the statisticians, to drive harmonization and modeling. We remodeled our structures to be SDMX compliant. Of course, harmonization, data, metadata, I think this was already mentioned more than once this morning. We strive to have a single point of information for our aggregated data. Microdata are not yet implemented. And of course, it's the basis to improve the data accessibility in general and visualization. Another buzzword that we heard already several times. So AI, we are starting with a small proof of concept to use natural language in the search for data in the database. So the business case was based on 3 main building blocks: modernizing our database, accessibility of data, improving overall the user experience. Of course, we took the opportunity to replace our legacy tools and optimize technically the solutions. And we realized this in collaboration with our partners, the OECD, BIS, and Meaningful Data. So our project is called Salsa. It has nothing to do with the sauce nor a dance. There is a link with SDMX and with statistics. To clarify the scope of the project, so you see here the full production flow of statistics from collection to dissemination and reporting. SALSA focuses on integrating the data, aggregated data, and reporting dissemination. So the first two big chunks, production and collection, are out of scope for this project. So I already talked about the past. So this was the only part we had SDMX compliant, the reporting towards the international institutions to comply with our legal obligations. And now, so the current project is this full building blocks of the process, which are covered by SDMX. And then I give now the floor to Frederick.
Thank you, Petra. Yeah, for this project, we have collaboration with BIS, OECD, and Meaningful Data. Mainly for these applications, we are using .stat Suite as really the core of the project. We created our own Salsa Manager, which is a bit the glue between the different applications that we use. VTL Suite from Meaningful Data is mainly used for validation and transformation of our SDMX data. And thanks to DBIs, we have a very nice FMR workbench tool, which lets the data owners work with their artifacts in a very user-friendly way. So how are these tools used in our process? Well, we see different types of users on top. The data owners, who are mainly the statisticians, they're going to bring their data into the system from several sources. We've got already some sources already in SDMX, so that's great. Fortunately, there's also a lot of data not already in SDMX format. So that's why our Salsa Manager takes over the conversion part and makes SDMX data of all the input data. On the storage parts, we've got different spaces with different purposes. We've got a staging space, internal sharing and reporting, all on the internal side of the MBB. And we've got the dissemination space, which is placed externally because it's our space that's directly connected to our website and is available for all external users. On the management part, we mainly rely on the tools provided by .stat Suite and the FMR workbench to manage our data and metadata. On the transformation and validation, like I said, it's VTL Suite together with some Python scripts and some adaptations done through our Salsa Manager. And we also use this part for some basic calculations. The transfer data from one place to another is done through the Salsa Manager because we need some mappings to be handled by the Salsa Manager. On the visualization part, again, we rely on the .stat Suite Data Explorer. We installed one on the internal side for internal users and one on the external side for the dissemination space. So that's the project where we are now. We go a bit further on the future, where we are trying to create an AI chatbot that connects with our SDMX database to let the user easily go through our data in our SDMX database. This is a technical architecture that we are using. I'm not going to go into detail over this because it would take too much time, but if you need, you can talk to us later. So the main flow, of course, is the user posing this question to the chatbot, which is using the well-known OpenAI LLMs and so on to generate an SDMX query to be able to retrieve the data from .stat Suite. There's a lot of data, so the AI chatbot will ask further clarifications to the user just until he can create the proper SDMX query to retrieve the data and release it back to the user. This is a small example on how our AI chatbot is working. So we pose a simple question like, okay, what's the current interest rate for a loan? Our chatbot does not have sufficient information. Well, he has too much data behind this question. So he will ask for Or in this case, are you interested in consumption, house purchase, or something else? For example, we would like to have the interest rate for house purchase. All right, he will pose another question. You want fixed or floating rate? We'll go for a fixed rate and for a period of 10 years. So, okay, with this information, you can create his SDMX query and retrieve the data from .stat suite. And he found, all right, for the interest rates over 10 years is 3.08% in June 2025. He makes a suggestion if you want to see it across 12 months. All right, let's do it. He will give a chart, a graph showing the evolution of the interest rate over 12 months. And then as an extra on the bottom, you have the option to view the data, which will redirect directly to the .stat suite environment, the Data Explorer. At this point, the user can go further to deep dive in the SDMX data. So yeah, that's the way we want to add a user experience through our chatbot. That's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much. If there is one question on the past and present, we can perhaps take it. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for a nice presentation and a great initiative on AI. So I have a question on training of the data. I mean, questions. How the model has been trained with appropriate question, because if it is disseminated for the public, then what kind of question can be asked? So how do you train that? Some insights will be more useful for us. Thank you.
It's for you.
Didn't understand completely the question, but you mean how the user can ask questions to the external part?
How does the model get trained?
How the model has trained using the questions. What are the expected questions? How you generate the questions?
Well, I will ask my technician, who is also in the room, to give you an answer on that question afterwards.
Take it offline, and so the next presentation will please you because we will clearly talk about the use of AI to that leverage on SDMX. So I give the floor to you, Utef.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try and be a bit motivational and explain why I think the world needs SDMX and StatGPT. So let's see if you're convinced. So I'll go through some motivation, a little cautionary tale on out-of-the-box tools, which I think is also motivation, actually. And maybe 3 steps we as statistical agencies or international organizations can follow to help users find their data using AI, and then what we've done and what the sort of next steps are. Okay, so motivation, I don't think anything on this slide is new. We have these quality metrics in statistical organizations, and probably as statistical organizations, we underperform on the areas of accessibility and serviceability. Some of the reasons why we underperform there, I think, is we describe data in technical terms, we disseminate it sort of multiple places, multiple vintages, multiple formats, and sometimes users sort of lose the official source of information because they're getting that information sort of from somewhere else, and they don't actually know who it is that's producing it. I think AI tools like StatGPT, but others, accessing official data using SDMX, modeled using SDMX, can really drastically improve this. But you might say, why StatGPT and not ChatGPT? And that's where the sort of cautionary tale, I think, comes in. So tools like ChatGPT are already doing that natural language conversation-based interaction. But if you ask a question, and this is a question, the conversation I had maybe 4 months ago, and I'll show you what that conversation looks like now. If you ask a question like, can you produce a table of economic growth for the G7, and can you take the data from the IMF's WEO? Maybe 3-4 months ago, you got a table like this. very nice little response. The magic happens. The table looks great. It says, here's a table summarizing. It's based on the International Monetary Fund World Economic Outlook. Here's the growth rates. And that all looks fantastic, except every one of those numbers in that table is wrong. And they're wrong, significantly. So we sort of did some analysis ourselves, and others have done the same thing. That's only producing the correct response 36% of the time. That's 10 unique conversations. If you ask that same question in a single conversation, it's actually worse. You only get the response sort of 17% of the time correct. And it varies by country. So for some reason, United States, the response was generally better. 93% of the time it was correct. Germany was never correct once. I don't know why. So this is, and the other thing is that these results, just looking at them, if you don't have any sort of sense of what, the growth in these countries would be, they look plausible. You think, oh, well, seems a bit right. How much are people really going past this table to sort of investigate whether these numbers are actually correct? And of course, it's all tagged in this sort of official way, right? In International Monetary Fund, you had this little box. You're like, oh, well, that's the IMF. So we as statistical organizations should be very concerned about this. If you're producing data and this is how people are consuming it, this is a problem. So it's actually changed a little bit. So if you did that maybe a month ago or 3 weeks ago, the new versions of ChatGPT play data a lot safer. So you ask the same question, it sort of comes back with this message. I certainly don't have access to the internet or the live data set. And it gives you sort of instructions on how you could go find the data. So go to the IMF's WEO page, enter these things, do some filtering. And then at the end, I kind of like this response. Well, actually, if you have the data, why don't you give it to me and I'll help summarize it. And it's like, well, if I'm the user, that's why I came to talk to you in the first place. I don't have the data. So that's not great. And if you did this maybe 3 or 4 days ago, actually you'd get something that looks a lot more like this table, but in the table, it would have identified sort of sources where those numbers came from, but those sources will be where it found that information. And that'll be things like Reuters. I saw once like a sort of Chinese news agency, a whole bunch of sources of whatever web page it was that it found that number from. And I didn't do sort of the investigation as to how accurate those numbers are. Maybe they're more accurate than this table, but also that's not the source of official data for Canada, right? That's StatCan. So this is a problem. So how can statistical agencies use AI, which seems incredibly powerful to have these conversations? You know that they're already using it. How can we make this better so that they can find the data they were looking for? So I sort of 3, I think, steps. First of all, we're already doing this one, right? Make data AI ready using SDMX. So the data modeling part, actually, the AI agents already understand SDMX very well. So they're probably maybe ahead of us in this room on what the entire sort of SDMX standard looks like as a whole. And SDMX also has the advantage it's really well identified with descriptive metadata and semantic relationships. This is a big power of SDMX. Semantic versioning, which is new in this sort of newer standard, provides transparency to the agents as well as us on the transparency and predictability of updates. So what is the latest version changed? How has it changed? This information should be available to everybody. You have the SDMX API endpoints. We have some structure around those, although we all have a little bit of our own flavor of SDMX API endpoints, and I think that's an issue. So, but SDMX has gone a long way in towards sort of defining what those API endpoints should look like. I think this next bullet point is extremely valuable. SDMX is really a standard, but it's the community behind it. And at the end of the day, the sort of subject matter expertise that we have a community have about the data and the standard is going to be incredibly important. And maybe that's our biggest advantage over, say, the tech companies. We really understand the data. And again, we have the subject matter expertise and sort of the tech companies don't. I think the standard needs to be advanced, and I've put in brackets here that a technical working group is on it. I think they are. I know they are. There'll probably be other sessions during this conference about this. Data harmonization within and between organizations. I think, again, we all have our little flavors of SDMX. It's all very close, but it's not quite the same. That's true on the APIs. That's true on the modeling. I think we need to go farther there. And then this next one, I think, is probably the next big thing. So this model context protocol, this is sort of like how agents talk to other agents. So how do we make sort of StatGPT and the data that's sitting there available to, say, the global data commons produced by Google or by ChatGPT? We don't just want them to access the data. We want them to access that data plus sort of our agents sitting on top of it. And that brings me to this sort of last point. So you've modeled your data in SDMX already. You have an SDMX API endpoint, so you're done, right? And we think not quite. And if you were done, then ChatGPT would be already using your data, and they're not. Okay, so this is the second point. So I really think we need to sort of have this index of certified AI-ready statistics. And this is something that George Simon was talking about this morning. This is completely in line with what he was saying. So we have this idea of this global trusted data commons. So this is an index. This isn't a database. This is just an index, machine readable and metadata rich statistics from trusted sources accessible through the agency's API. So really an index of where all this data sits. It can act as this sort of truth layer for GenAI applications. So this is where the trust part comes in, right? What does it mean to be in this global trusted data commons? It means that you're sort of gone through this readiness sort of concept, right? And I'll get into what readiness I think should mean, but it's data that has been made AI ready and that we as statistical producers are sort of standing behind. So readiness really comes down to, I think, consistency and completeness. And this is a little bit that idea of we all have these different flavors, right? We all have slightly different ways we are dealing with the SDMX standard. So what do we mean by consistency and completeness? So we think data modeling using SDMX, we're already doing that, 2.1, 3, 3.1, whatever the standard is, use SDMX. In StatGPT's case, we're accessing all of that data using the SDMX1 library, but there could be others. Structural data that's unambiguous, clear, and descriptive. This is what George Simon was saying, right? Central place where we're completely consistent on the metadata. Structural artifacts with consistent naming conventions and descriptions that indicate business purpose. So again, you could have SDMX modeling, but if in your data modeling you have an other, we don't know what other is, and the data agents, the AI agents don't know what other is either. So it really has to be described well. And then you might have an SDMX API, but how good is it? How reliable is it? What's the latency? How quickly can we pull data from there? That's going to be extremely important if you're thinking about interacting with, say, the Googles of the world, where speed is incredibly important. Okay, so the third thing is we use a GenAI application. Of course, I'm particularly biased towards StatGPT, but I just want to say that StatGPT is just one potential tool that you could be using to access. It's an open source generative AI interface. It's purpose built now to interact with the global trusted data commons. We kind of view it as a Pathfinder application. It's really demonstrating how GenAI can be used to responsibly interact with official statistics. You showed one, I mean, very similar. But the development of StatGPT is steered by the SDMX community and the national agencies. We have a sort of steering committee, and the sort of front end of StatGPT, what's nice if it's sort of steered and governed by this community is you can attach some custom UI, UX guardrails. So what do we mean by guardrails? Like, what are the allowable questions? What is the data that is allowed to be transacted with? So that could also be advantageous. So coming back to where I started, well, if you ask that same question to StatGPT, can you generate this table of economic growth for G7 countries? It'll be very transparent about the processing steps that are followed. I can assure you all the numbers in this table are 100% correct. And if you ask it 100 times, you're going to get the right response 100% of the time. You're going to have the source clearly stated and linked. And so what I mean, it's very similar to what we saw in the Belgian case. That URL goes to the actual data place. That isn't the article where the information was read. That's the actual data, because what's in this table is just a query of our SDMX API. So that's how that table was built. So it's just demonstrating what's possible, but it's just one, I think, application in the large ecosystem. And I think that's where this MCP really comes in. We want to make sure that these agents that are sort of finding this correct information are accessible by other agents. And that's really what MCP is this sort of agent-to-agent connection. So we want to continue to work with the ChatGPTs, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world, because let's be honest, that's where people are going to go to ask these questions. But we want to make sure that they get the right answer. And actually, Google wants to make sure that they're showing the right answer as well. So I think we're fully aligned there. I'm getting close to the end of my time. Oh, that's okay. I'm on the last slide. Okay, so what's next? We have an advisory committee. We've established it. It consists of all the SDMX sponsors, statistical agencies. It's guiding the creation of StatGPT and the Global Trusted Data Commons. It really steers that development. In line with the sort of principles of this community, we made StatGPT open source. That's the QR code that takes you to the StatGPT GitHub repository. So check it out. If you want to put StatGPT on top of your own data, you can try it. It's available in GitHub now. We're going to put it in SDMX.io soon. Please join our community. If you want to test StatGPT on top of the Global Trusted Data Commons, come see us. There's not a lot of data in the Global Trusted Data Commons yet, which I'll get to in a second. Our development partner EPAM is here. We can go through like detailed demo out in the booth in the sessions, or I can show you. So please approach us. We are going to continue to work with the private sector because I think, like I said before, Google's where people are going already. They're already going to ChatGPT. We have to make sure that when they go there, it's our agents that those agents end up talking to, and that they're going to produce the correct data. And really, this is sort of the key point. The Global Trusted Data Commons, if you believe it's a good idea, it's only going to be as good as the data that's in there. Inquire about onboarding your data into this commons. I think it's possible. It's not super complicated, but we're trying to do a readiness toolkit. So how close are you to being able to onboard this data into the Global Trusted Data Commons? We're trying to make that as sort of easy as possible. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I know the topic of AI is of high interest, but we will come back later on, and I turn directly to Abdullah from the United Nations Statistics Division to present other use cases.
Yeah, thank you, Dominique. So after all the excitement of AI, I'm here to talk about something which might appear more mundane, like a business case, but is nevertheless quite important because in a way it's the foundation of our work. So what's a business case? A business case provides justification for a program or a project. A business case is basically a need that is to be addressed. And the first SDMX business case was developed in the year 2000 and approved in the year 2000. And that was a major achievement because for the first time it articulated the benefits of SDMX and described the typical use cases. And then in 2024, a task team was formed to review the business case. So you might ask, we lived without a business case for 15 years, then we finally got one, so why do we need yet another business case so soon after that? And the thing is, in the last few years, probably the global pandemic played its role. The development of SDMX, basically, I think it has exploded. There have been so many new things, so many new developments that we realized that the business case needs to be updated. There needs to be more coverage of use cases beyond the exchange and dissemination. It needs to better address the needs of national statistical agencies. And of course, we need coverage of emerging use cases. So SDMX started, the original use case at the start of SDMX was data exchange, and that's in the name. But more recently, other use cases have begun to play a much larger role. And in particular, such use cases as modernization of business processes and data metadata governance. We have many high-level data governance initiatives, but ultimately, someone needs to sit down at their desk and workstation and put the data government into practice. And actually, this is where SDMX can help a lot. So the new SDMX business case, whose zero draft is just under review, it answers the question of how SDMX can help address specific issues faced by statistical offices. The new business case is centered around 5 broad use cases: modernization of business processes, data and metadata dissemination and sharing, data management and governance, strategic interoperability, and last but not least, data exchange and reporting. The business case will also provide an overview of the SDMX ecosystem and will include benefit maps and case studies as appendices. So let's go over the use cases for SDMX. Modernization of business processes. I think that in recent years, this has emerged as one of the most important use cases. It turns out that actually, as you decide to implement SDMX for various purposes along your statistical value chain, this is your opportunity to improve your business processes, to improve productivity, to automate your processes, and all the while achieving a higher quality of data. SDMX has a track record to accelerate the implementation of automation. And so basically, you get things automated faster and at a lower cost than would be the case otherwise. Scalability and agility, this is a very interesting topic. So-called metadata-driven processes have already been mentioned, but perhaps this needs to be explained in just a little detail. What SDMX does is it empowers business users to take charge of the processes, to manage the business processes themselves. Properly structured processes based on SDMX empower statisticians, business users that is, to control those processes to a much higher, much greater degree than was the case in the past. Statisticians can manage structural metadata, and by managing those structural metadata, they can manage their business processes with minimum intervention by IT. So the productivity grows and the data quality grows. Operational efficiency, same thing. You can use off-the-shelf software built to best industry practices and maintained by the community. And that spares you from having to develop your own custom-built software. Dissemination and sharing. Well, of course, you have harmonization and interoperability, which greatly increase the usability of the data for your users. Improved accessibility and discoverability. Probably many in the room have used the global registry. Now the SGDS is coming, the Global Discovery Services, which will be talked about during the week, which basically can greatly improve the findability of data and metadata sources. Portability and cost efficiency. SDMX allows you to change between backend and front-end applications, pick those that suit you best, and avoid vendor lock-in. This is very important. And of course, data quality. Never get away from data quality. That's a core topic. In the case of data and metadata management and governance, again, we have the frameworks, and SDMX gives you tools for practical implementation of these frameworks. Software tools, but not just that. Also the guidelines and recommendations developed by the community, and again, that follow industry best practices. So SDMX does allow you to strengthen data governance and improve your data management.